What if I told you that if we do just this one thing, we wouldn't have to worry about Biden's crazy executive decrees targeting our rights? We wouldn't have to worry about the unconstitutional abominations coming out of our deep state Congress? What if I told you we could learn something important from the deep state Democrats and the crazy tactics they've been using over the last 4 years? Stay tuned and I'll tell you more. Welcome to Behind the Deep State. I'm your host, Alex Newman, and I am not part of the deep state. Surprise! So we've been doing this mini-series in our series on the deep state, focusing on solutions. And I want to continue that today by breaking down another really significant and important solution. That is nullification. So my friend Peter Rakowski just did a phenomenal article in the March 22nd issue of the New American Magazine. If you don't subscribe yet, you should. It's a great publication. I'm the senior editor there, by the way. And the first thing we need to understand nullification is the constitutional structure of our Republican form of government. Right, there is a lot of mythology, a lot of falsehood surrounding the understanding of an average American about the way our government is supposed to work. And this is, of course, by design. If you've watched these videos, you know the government indoctrination system masquerading as a public school system is deliberately dumbing down our children, deliberately teaching them phony history and fraudulent civics. But in the real world, in the real history, America's states actually came together and formed a union. So they gave up certain limited powers, right? The states were sovereign, and they gave up certain limited powers under the U.S. Constitution to the federal government, right? That's the relationship. This is not the feds created states and the feds give the states power. It's just exactly the opposite. The states created the federal government to serve as their agent, and they gave this agent a few specific and defined responsibilities. So let me use an example. Let me illustrate this for you. Say you need a plumber to fix the pipes at your house. You call up a plumber, you sign a contract, you say, I'd like you to fix this plumbing issue that I have. And the plumber gets to your house, and he comes with a big truck full of bright orange paint and some paint brushes, and he starts painting your house bright orange. You're like, hey, what are you doing? I didn't hire you to paint my house orange. I hired you to fix my pipes. What in the world is going on here? And then he has the nerve to say, by the way, that'll be $800,000, please. If you're anything like me, you'd probably be a little upset about that, right? But that's exactly what the federal government is doing today. Our states hired the federal government. They created the federal government to do a few little things, right? They're supposed to run a post office, have a navy, keep a patent office. There's 3 federal crimes: piracy, treason, and, of course, sedition and counterfeiting. Right? So these are the crimes that the federal government is authorized to punish and to legislate on. And yet now we have this crazy, out of control, goofy federal government painting our house orange, stealing all our liberties, emptying our savings accounts, rifling through our safe, going through our documents and our desks, terrorizing our children, teaching them things that you wouldn't in a million years dream of teaching children. And then they want us to pay for the privilege, right? This is crazy. This is totally ridiculous. Nobody, if you went to a court of law, nobody would say, hey, you have to give that plumber $800,000. Yeah, I know technically you didn't sign a contract. Technically you didn't really want the plumber to paint your house a stupid bright orange, but hey, he did it. And so now you got to fork over the money, right? And yet the situation is much more serious than just having an orange house, right? An orange house, while maybe a little bit annoying and a little goofy, maybe your neighbors would think you're a weirdo, it's not the end of the world. But if you lose all your freedoms, if you lose your ability to govern yourself and to protect your God-given rights, then that's a major problem. The next big thing we need to understand is that our rights actually come from God, right? The federal government did not give us our rights. And you don't have to take my word for it. I know they don't teach this in government indoctrination centers anymore. We'll do a whole episode on that part of the solution soon. But our founding fathers thought this was pretty simple, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and of course, property. This means God gave us our rights, right? And then they said governments are instituted among men for the purpose of protecting these rights. So that's what the Founding Fathers had in mind. God gave us rights. We give the government the authority to protect our rights. And that's really all we have the power to give the government the authority to do, right? If I don't have the authority to go rob my neighbor, then I can't give the government the authority to go rob my neighbor. If I don't have the authority to kill my neighbor, I can't give the government the authority to kill my neighbor. And so these were really biblical ideas. God in the Bible explains that the purpose of government is to punish evil. God defines evil as murder, so you have a right to life. God defines evil as theft and stealing, and so you have a right to your property. These are very basic things that everybody should have learned in first or second grade. And so that's why the states created the Constitution. Make it a little bit simpler to protect our rights, and certain things would be better handled at a federal level than at a state level. So let's now get into the text of the Constitution itself, because you'll hear a lot of people who argue against nullification say, well, any laws passed by Congress or maybe even executive decrees by somebody in the White House are the supreme law of the land. And they point to Article 6, the so-called Supremacy Clause. Well, if you actually go to your Constitution and you actually read Article 6, what you'll see is that the founders were very, very clear here. Laws are only the supreme part of the supreme law of the land if they are made in pursuance thereof, right? The Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land, and the statutes made in pursuance thereof. That means if a statute is made in defiance thereof, that makes that statute illegitimate. It's a usurpation. It's null and void, and no one is bound to obey it. It's like the crazy plumber coming to your house and painting everything orange, right? You would never say, well, now you have to accept that your house is going to be orange because, that's what the plumber decided to do, right? It's silly. It's ludicrous. It's ridiculous. And yet that's exactly what we're dealing with here. Any law that is made in defiance of the Constitution is no law at all. Even the Supreme Court, which is part of the federal government, has recognized this. And then just in case that wasn't obvious just from reading the Constitution, the Founding Fathers actually put the 10th Amendment in there too, just to make it explicit. There is no debating it. They said that any powers not delegated to the U.S. government under the Constitution are reserved for the states or for the people, right? If we didn't specifically give you this power, Article 1, Section 8 lists almost all of them, then you don't have that power. Then those powers are retained by the states that created this entity called the federal government, or by the people who ultimately retain the sovereignty in the states under God, as the great motto of the great state of South Dakota explains. So really important to understand all this background, guys. Now, you'll also hear this, again, this notion that nullification is unconstitutional. And so I thought, who better to consult than the people who actually wrote the Constitution, right? Some of our most important founding fathers were very, very clear on these points. The author of the Declaration of Independence, the primary author, Thomas Jefferson, and the primary author of our Constitution, James Madison, they both viewed nullification as not just an important right of states, but a duty of states to keep this new creation in check. In fact, some of them were very worried about this new creation. They thought, what if they start usurping power? And what if they start taking responsibilities that were never delegated to them? What if they start painting the house orange? What do we do then? Well, they gave us the answer, okay? If you go to the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions, almost right out the box, the federal government started trying to usurp new powers. And so Virginia and Kentucky rejected some of these usurpations. And Thomas Jefferson, explained that nullification is the rightful remedy. That was his term. The rightful remedy to dealing with federal usurpations of power. So nullify unconstitutional laws. That's the rightful remedy, according to the guy who wrote the Declaration of Independence. Now let's go over to Madison, the father of our Constitution, as he's often called. He explained that states were, and I'm quoting here, duty-bound to interpose to arrest the progress of evil. So if the federal government is doing evil, if the federal government is stepping outside the bounds of the contract that created it, then states don't have just the right to interpose, they have a duty to do that. And if you go read Federalist Paper number 46 by James Madison, he actually gave 4 different steps that states could take to counteract lawless federal programs, whether they are warrantable or unwarrantable. And the most significant, he explained, was a refusal to cooperate with officers of the Union. So officers of the Union come in and they want to paint your house orange, and then state officials say, you will not be painting any houses orange around here. You were never given the authority to paint that house orange, or to take away our gun rights, or to murder babies, or to do whatever other insane things the federal government has started doing. Now, these principles were understood long before our war for independence. These principles were used by the colonies to nullify illegal usurpations by British authorities. Right? There's a long tradition in Anglo-Saxon and Western civilization of using nullification or something similar to nullification by another name to resist illegal and evil usurpations of power by rulers, whether they be kings or barons or nobles or aristocrats or whatever you want to say. So, now, I mentioned that we could learn something from the Democrats, and not a whole lot of things, but during the last 4 years, during the Trump administration, they really got serious about using nullification. And in many cases, they used it improperly, right? Because a state does not have a right to nullify a constitutional federal law. If Congress says, hey, we want to fund the Navy because we need a Navy to protect us from foreign invaders, and then the state of New York, says, well, we don't agree with a Navy. We are going to withhold tax money from our state and nullify your effort to create a Navy. We're not going to let you park any of your Navy ships here, and we're not even going to let you sail in our waters. Then the federal government would be well within its rights to say, hey, sorry, New York, you gave up that responsibility under Article 1, Section 8. You've authorized the federal government to create and maintain a Navy. So, nice try, but you got to accept the Navy. Okay. Well, the Democrats, they used or tried to use nullification in stopping federal laws on illegal immigration. Well, immigration, naturalization, these are federal responsibilities under our Constitution, and so they went wrong. But there is another area where Democrats actually, constitutionally speaking, at least, you can think what you want about, dope smoking and whatever. I don't recommend it. But the Democrats were actually right on this constitutional principle, and some Republicans who participated. So how many Democrats right this moment are sitting at home in Colorado or California or Oregon or Washington or pick your state smoking marijuana? A whole lot of them, right? But we have federal statutes on the books that purport to criminalize marijuana, and there's UN treaties that purport to criminalize marijuana. How can it be then that all these Democrats are at home smoking pot? Well, they used nullification, right? On drugs, the U.S. Constitution never authorized the federal government to prohibit any kind of substance, right? That's why we needed a constitutional amendment when the federal government wanted to ban alcohol. And so on this issue, states are well within their constitutional authority to stop putting people in jail for smoking plants if that's what they choose to do, right? And Republican states would be perfectly well within their constitutional responsibilities and authorities if they wanted to keep putting people in cages for smoking plants. That's just the way our constitutional system works. We can debate the merits or demerits of these policies, but as the Constitution explains it, this is a state decision, not a federal decision. Now, we do have some Republican states, thankfully, already working on nullification projects. In fact, we've had many Republican states already nullify certain things. We have Republican states trying to become sanctuary states for unborn babies. Amen. Goodness gracious, we need that so badly. Little babies are being slaughtered all across this country based on a totally illegal, totally fraudulent, totally ridiculous usurpation of power by the Supreme Court in Roe versus Wade. They claimed that they found in the penumbras of the Constitution some sort of nonsensical right to murder your babies, and therefore any states that had criminalized the murder of babies, which was most of them, would then be punished for that. We've also got states that are working to protect gun rights. We've got now sanctuary states for gun rights. We've got sanctuary counties, sanctuary cities for gun rights. And again, this is a constitutionally appropriate policy. Our U.S. Constitution gave exactly zero power to the federal government to regulate or ban or demand background checks or any of this kind of stuff on federal firearms, on firearms rights, right? In fact, our Constitution says that the Second Amendment protects a right to keep and bear arms, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. So now we have several states, Texas and Wyoming and South Dakota. They are working on what's called comprehensive nullification bills. And if you read this article by my friend Peter, you'll see some of the others. These are really interesting. They would create these committees that would look at all this garbage coming down from the federal government and would decide on a case-by-case basis, hey, this is constitutional, we will obey. Hey, this is ridiculous, this is not constitutional. They don't have the right to paint this house orange, so no, we're not going to accept that the house is orange. And they have different processes, right? Sometimes the commission would decide whether it's constitutional. The legislature and the governor would then look at the recommendations by the commission and determine, hey, that's an unconstitutional abomination. It's a usurpation. We are not going to allow the slaughter of babies in this state. Or we are not going to allow the disarming of law-abiding citizens in this state. Or we are not going to allow the shutdown of churches in this state. Or forcing people to put things on their face under the guise of protecting us from some or other disease, right? So these are all constitutional issues. We've got a lot of states working on this. On the abortion front, Oklahoma is leading the pack. I was actually just in Oklahoma some months ago, and man, do they have some great people in their legislature working on this. They are trying to abolish abortion, and what they're saying is simple. The Supreme Court never had any kind of authority to overturn our murder laws, whether those be for unborn babies or babies that are already born, or for older people, right? You just don't have the authority. A murder is a state responsibility. States are the ones that criminalize murder. States are the ones that punish murder. Therefore, the federal government has no power whatsoever to mandate murder in our state. And that means anybody who commits murder in our state is going to jail. Whether the Supreme Court has an opinion about that or not, people are going to jail. And we've seen similar things on gun rights. We've seen some states now are considering legislation that would arrest federal officials who come into their state with the intention of committing crimes like disarming American citizens, like shutting down God-given rights like free speech, assembly, churches, etc. And maybe this is a healthy development. The states have no obligation to submit to their houses being painted orange. They never agreed to that. If the federal government wants these kinds of powers, there's a very simple process for that. It's outlined right in the text of the Constitution. You can propose an amendment, and if you can get huge majorities of Americans to agree, we can have the amendment approved and then ratified by the states, and then you can do what you want, right? At least constitutionally speaking. We've also got state efforts to nullify unconstitutional wars, unconstitutional spying. We've got states trying to say that we will not send our National Guard troops to go fight in your illegal foreign wars for the deep state's New World Order. We've got state laws now popping up all over the country. Many of them have already passed, declaring gold and silver to be legal tender. Actually, Texas is at the forefront of this. They've created a gold depository. So incredible things happening on the nullification front, and we need a whole lot more of that, guys. Now, deep state voices, the propagandists pretending to be journalists, the fake media, a lot of them are now trying to say that nullification is actually racist. It's associated with slavery and racism, and therefore we must not have any nullification. Well, if you look at the facts are just the opposite. Okay, probably the best known example of nullification in American history was the Fugitive Slave Act. So Congress passed this abominable act declaring that any slave who escaped from his owner and went to a northern state would have to be captured, kidnapped, and then taken back to his so-called master. Well, the northern states, in particular Wisconsin, said, nope, actually, people are not property. You have no authority to pass any kind of law like that, so we are not going to submit to that. We're not going to let you paint the house orange. We're not going to send people back to you to be put back in chains. And some of the southern states were real grumpy about that. South Carolina actually listed this nullification by the northern states in its list of reasons why it was leaving the Union. Okay, so the idea that nullification is racist is preposterous. That's a red herring by liars and fraudsters and charlatans who don't have any actual legitimate arguments. And if that was true, what do we say about all these Democrats smoking pot in Colorado or Washington or Oregon or take your pick, right? Are they all racist for nullifying unconstitutional federal statutes? That's interesting. I bet the potheads would be curious to know. Now, states are the ideal level to resist this tyranny with nullification. Hands down, states created the Union. States are the sovereigns in this country, and so states have the ability and should have the ability to nullify. That's the gold standard, is if you can get your legislature to pass a nullification law, your governor to sign it, and then enforce it. However, at the local level, there is a lot that can and should be done as well, right? Your sheriff. Right? We've interviewed Sheriff Richard Mack here before. It is so critical that sheriffs understand they don't work for the federal government. In fact, they take an oath to the U.S. Constitution and to their state constitution. They are employees of their communities, of their counties. You don't work for Biden. If Biden passes some executive order demanding this or that gun control or this or that shutdown of energy production, the sheriff has an obligation to say, no, that's not constitutional. I don't work for you. I work for the people of this county. I swore an oath to defend the U.S. Constitution. So no, we're not going to be disarming law-abiding citizens. We're not going to be shutting down churches. We are not going to be shutting down energy production. That is lawlessness and will not be tolerated. And in an extreme case, where they send in goons with costumes and firearms to go terrorize local citizens, states and local governments, the sheriffs, have an obligation to step in and say, no, you will not come into our county and terrorize our citizens and trample on the God-given rights of the people of this community. Not only do you have no power to do that, it's against the law for you to do that because the Constitution is still the law around here. Now, for the theological, the biblical foundation for this, please go watch our interview. We did a phenomenal interview with Pastor Matt Trewhella. He wrote a book on the doctrine of the lesser magistrates. So this is not new. This is not uniquely American. The Bible speaks frequently of people using nullification, of interposing on these types of issues, right? Pharaoh told the Hebrew midwives to start murdering baby boys, and they said no. And what does it say? God was appreciative of that. The women feared God, not Pharaoh, and so he dealt well with the midwives, right? Thousands of years ago. Then we had the king ordering Daniel to quit praying to God, right? He kind of got tricked into it, but he ordered, the law was that he couldn't pray to God. So Daniel goes up to his room, he opens up the windows so everybody can see, and then he prays to God. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Ordered to bow down before this goofy golden idol statue. There's a lot of modern day comparisons, right? Bow down before the LGBT golden idol, or we will prosecute you. We will jail you. We will shut down your church. We will unleash the lawsuits. Well, what did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego do? They said, sorry, king, we will not bow down to your idol, and God has the power to protect us from your little fiery furnace. But even if he doesn't protect us, we are still not going to bow down to your goofy idol. And this also holds, and there's so many examples. I've given whole lectures and sermons on this. But if you go all the way, fast forward to the New Testament, you see the apostles. They're ordered to quit preaching in the name of Jesus. And what do they say? Oh, well, the authority said to quit preaching in the name of Jesus, so I guess we'll just go home. Of course not, right? They interposed on behalf of all the people who needed to hear the gospel. They said, sorry, it is better for us to obey God than men. And, there's a lot of that here, right? The U.S. Supreme Court has ordered things that the Bible, that God plainly condemns, like the murder of children, right? They've ordered that all of our state governments sit back and allow the mass slaughter of children. Well, we know the purpose of government is to punish evil, and murdering babies is evil. And so governors and state legislatures and sheriffs have a duty to say, this is a sanctuary for unborn babies. You will not murder babies. We will not tolerate these wicked, evil, illegal, and unconstitutional usurpations. So guys, this is an incredibly important tool in resisting the deep state. The deep state has now captured huge parts of our federal government. They have weaponized our federal government against our communities, against our people, against our states, against our God-given rights. But we are not powerless, right? Get on the phone with your state legislator. Get on the phone with your state senator. Get on the phone with your governor. Ask if you can set up an appointment. Get together with a group of people. Go and have a meeting and say, look, you need to read this article. You need to listen to this video. You need to read this book, The Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates, and you need to do your duty. It's not just your right to interpose. It's not just your right to nullify these abominable usurpations, these constitutional abuses being perpetrated against us by the deep state. It is your duty to do it. I'm Alex Newman. You're watching Behind the Deep State. We're doing a little series within Behind the Deep State on solutions because we've spent over a year now outlining different facets of the deep state, showing you what's going on, showing you who these people are, showing you what they're doing. Now we thought it's time to give some solutions. So we will continue on this series, and eventually we'll get back to exposing more deep state. There might even be some woven into these solutions series that we're doing. But I just want to thank you for watching. I want to encourage you to please share this out. The big tech social media companies are part of the deep state swamp. They don't want solutions for the people to resist the deep state swamp to get out to the American people. So if you don't share this with your state representative, if you don't share this with your county commissioner or your mayor or your sheriff, Facebook and YouTube aren't going to do it, right? So get this out there, guys. Go over to thenewamerican.com, sign up, get a subscription to our print magazine, sign up, follow us on the new and improved social media, right? We're all over now. We're on Rumble. If you want to find our videos, we're on different platforms. We're moving and expanding because the big tech companies are a disgrace. We'll deal with them in a future issue. But thank you guys for watching. Thank you for all that you're doing, and God bless you all. They say every time someone subscribes to the New American Magazine, a member of the deep state loses his mind. Well, now's your chance to help a lot of deep state members lose their mind. Head over to thenewamerican.com, subscribe to the magazine, subscribe to our daily, weekly, or monthly headlines, and let's beat the deep state into the ground. I'm Alex Newman. Thanks for watching.